Coronavirus to your criminal justice reform. But first, I want to talk about the campaign, presidential and federal campaigns here. Florida is a key state. Everybody knows it's a key state. John McCain lost Florida. Mitt Romney lost Florida. The establishment candidates didn't seem to do so well in Florida. They lost to Obama. President Trump won Florida against Hillary Clinton. How does it look in Florida right now?
Well, it's interesting, Mark. When Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, there were about 350,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in the state of Florida. Now it's less than 180,000 differential, and we think when all the books are finally in, we think it may be closer to 150,000. So whatever it is in that range, it'll be the closest Republicans have ever been to Democrats in Florida in the history of the state. And I think that that's a testament to folks looking to Florida as a place where they can find greener pastures. We see people who are fed up with high taxes in places like Illinois or the Northeast, and they come down. And I do think that many of them are registering as Republicans because I think they understand that we've had laboratories of democracy in this country with the states doing different approaches, and approaches like Florida have been more successful. So I think the president is facing an electorate that is more inclined to vote for him in 2020 than the one that he successfully got convinced to vote for him in 2016.
It also looks like he has significant support in the Hispanic community, among Cubans, among Venezuelans, among Puerto Ricans. The governor of Puerto Rico just endorsed the president of the United States. Is that correct?
It is correct, and I think that's going to be the biggest improvement if you look in Miami-Dade County, he's going to probably cut the margin in half for his deficit against Hillary Clinton, and that's going to be on the backs of a really unified and energized Cuban-American community, but also a lot of the things he's done that have resonated with our Venezuelan Americans, and really a whole bunch of different Hispanics from Latin and Central America who have their origins there. And I also think what's helped him is how left-wing the Democratic Party has gone on a lot of these issues. And so those are voters down in South Florida who are very sensitive about leftism because they had their lives upended, their parents' or grandparents' lives upended by left-wing dictators in places like Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua. And so I think the president's been very strong on those issues, and I think you're going to see that resulting in the polls. But I also think, and I know we'll talk about this a little more later, some of the stuff with the unrest that we've seen in the streets across the country, and you have people like Biden who were silent on it for months. You actually had Kamala Harris was bailing out some of the Minneapolis rioters, and they were almost cheering this on. That is simply unacceptable to many of those voters, and I think the president has smartly been in favor of law and order, and I think that that's going to pay dividends. You know, when we had the protests were breaking out and the rioting was breaking out at the beginning of June, in Florida, we were I called up the National Guard. We had other people ready. But, Miami-Dade County, they got a Republican county mayor. He had everybody there. They had riots in the 80s. They did not want to go through it again. And they were able to handle it. And that just shows you that the leadership does matter. So I think that he's going to benefit in South Florida, and I think that that's going to be really. But if you look at him winning Florida, Mark, in 2016 with such a deficit in Miami-Dade, if you would have told anyone before the election the deficit was going to be that big, they would say there's no way he can win it. And he was bringing out voters that people had never seen in Florida before. And so I think if he holds those voters, the improvements in Miami-Dade are going to put him in a really good position.
I go to Florida every now and then. I have family there. I have a home there as well. And I sense a lot of excitement there. Maybe it's anecdotal. But the people who come up to me, the Trump supporters, unlike Virginia and other locations, they are really riled up. They are really chomping at the bit to vote on Election Day. Is that your sense?
I think so. I think that the demographics are really good for him in Florida. I think there's a lot of folks that are very energized. I mean, if you think about the 2016 presidential primary in Florida, and I know the primary electorate's not necessarily the same as the general electorate, but he won 66 out of 67 counties against the sitting senator in Florida. You also had Senator Cruz, who was a formidable candidate, and it was a massive sweep. And so I think that he's got a really strong base of support here. But also, Mark, he's delivered on a lot of issues that are important to Floridians. We talked about, of course, how he's been strong against dictators in Latin America. I think you would agree with this. He's been the most successful president in terms of supporting Israel and bringing a more peaceful environment to the Middle East that we've seen, certainly in my lifetime. If you look at what's happened to ISIS since he's gotten in, how he stood up against Iran, pulled out of the Iran deal, and how we now have Arab countries making peace with Israel. So they're overcoming historic prejudices because they understand that Israel and the United States are what's right with the Middle East, and Iran and its ilk are what's wrong. And so I think you've seen him lead time and time again. Then there's been issues specific to Florida that he's led on. He's really supported us with hurricane response and relief. He's also done a lot on the Everglades and Lake Okeechobee. You know, we're a state that people love to boat, they love to fish, and you need to have really good waterways and high water quality. And so he's helped us improve that. We've made a lot of strides there. So I think it's a lot of stuff just generally with what he's done, but I do think he's delivered specifically for Florida in ways that voters recognize.
You know, you describe a president who is involved in day-to-day activities, who wants to be responsive to the states, to your state, who tries to fill the gaps wherever he can, who tries to use federal power wherever the Constitution allows him to support your state and other states. I don't think this gets enough attention. And before we dig heavily into the coronavirus, because you have done things that are really quite remarkable that other states have not done, before we do that, my question to you is this. Early on, when this virus broke out, everybody was worried about a number of states, including Florida, because of the tourism in Florida, because of the various cruise ships that come to Florida and so forth. You have a lot of senior citizens in Florida. When you would get on the phone with him or his staff, were they responsive? Were they on top of things? Were they helpful? Tell us about that.
Oh, without question. I think that if you look at the logistical feats that they were able to accomplish, those early days, of course, things were very, very scarce, and they delivered really for all the states. I mean, the president worked in a bipartisan way. He was helping these Democratic governors. It didn't matter about party. He obviously did a lot for the state of Florida. But I could tell you just this week, for example, Mark, I was in the Villages, which is a senior community, and I was delivering 15-minute rapid tests for them to be able to have, if they want to get tested, if they have family visiting, you can do it, get the result. The federal government bought 150 million of those, and they're distributing it free to all the states. And so we're now getting 400,000 a week, and we're focusing it on our senior citizens that protect them since they're more vulnerable to the disease. But if you look at the innovation that's been sparked, he did not want bureaucracy to hold any of this back. He partnered with the private sector, and I think has put us in a much better position to handle this going forward, not just with the testing, but with some of the antivirals that are now coming out. And that's not even talking about yet the vaccine. So he's been somebody that would not take no for an answer, and he wouldn't let the bureaucracy grind everything to a halt. And I think that's really important, because you can have the right policies, you can make the right decisions, but if they don't get executed, then it's not going to amount to very much. And he was very intent on not letting the bureaucracy hold things up.
But there's this Biden-Harris media Democrat narrative that he didn't get off the mark fast enough, which I think is outrageous, particularly considering the way the Democrats conducted themselves. You're a governor. You're the executive of Florida. You're dealing with this day in and day out, getting dirt under your fingernails. Did you find the president and the administration getting off the mark quickly, trying to determine what you need? When you called, you would tell them what you would need, and he would do whatever he could to provide it?
Well, the president, for sure. In fact, I was one of the few governors to call at the end of January for stopping the flights from China, and he did that very shortly thereafter. He was pilloried for it. In fact, Biden and Harris and all the Democrats said that it was a knee-jerk reaction. They actually accused him of being bigoted for doing it. It was the right decision. It was very early on in the process for him to do it. And then as we got into February, you have a lot of the people who are now criticizing him. They were downplaying this. They were saying, go to Chinatown, do all these things. Even into March, you had that. And so I think that this was something that he responded to very early. early. There was also a lot of things that we didn't quite know, Mark. I mean, we saw these images out of China where people were just dropping dead in the street. Now, that obviously is not how the disease actually works, and we started to see that in Italy and some other places. But there was a lot of uncertainty about what the burdens on the hospitals would be, who really was vulnerable. And I think as the data came in, it was pretty clear that this was more concentrated in terms of its negative effects on our elderly population. And so I think that as they got that, the president was very responsive to it. But he acted very early, and in fact, when a lot of people really weren't talking about coronavirus. So I think a lot of this is unfair. You know, when Joe Biden says he would have done all these things, Joe Biden was holding big campaign rallies the second week of March. He wasn't calling for anything. The Democrats had a presidential primary debate at the end of February. Coronavirus wasn't even discussed at that debate. So some of this is just revisionist history, but I think one of the really negative things about this is just how partisan it's been, particularly with the media. They've really used it as a weapon against the president because obviously they're very much opposed to the president, and that's just not how you deal with a pandemic. I mean, at some point you have to put the partisanship aside and work together to try to do what's best for the country, and I don't think the president was partisan about it at all. In fact, I know he was sending huge amounts of resources to Democrat states in the Northeast without even blinking an eye. The partisanship never entered into it at all.
Yes or no question to end this segment. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, she likes to say she's number 2 in line to the presidency. She has a lot of power, and spending authority begins in the House. You're a man who came out of the House before you ran for governor. Did Nancy Pelosi ever pick up the phone and say, Governor DeSantis, I'm the Speaker of the House. Let's unite and fight this thing. What can I do to help you? Yes or no?
No.
All right. Thank you. We'll be right back.